Welcome to the first EIU Technology and Science Symposium, Revolutions in Science and Technology Paradigms. We have all seen how science and technology change our lives, and in the presentations in this symposium, as you'll see, each presenter will give us a side of the panorama. So this will give us enrichment of our thoughts and ideas. Today is my pleasure to introduce my friend and my colleague at the School of Technology, Dr. Rigoberto Chinchilla. And he explained to us when he came new what the meaning of chinchilla. Maybe he will do that today also. And he is fondly known as Rigo.
Right. Well, good morning. So let's go to the matter. So this presentation will pretty much be divided in two big segments. The first segment, we will talk about biometrics in general, the kind of basic theory and basic technology behind it. And then in the second part of the presentation, we will go with the societal and legal consequences this can bring to us, and some of them we're already living it. All right, so just biometrics is just a study of any measurable biological characteristics. Could be anything as far as every human possesses. As far as what we measure is discriminatory, meaning what we measure can uniquely identify every human being. Now, when we put the security on it, we say, well, we are talking about something that we can measure almost instantaneously, okay, and typically by a computer to check the identity of an individual. Why biometrics? Well, it's perceived that is necessary. I'm not that convinced of that, but it's perceived that is necessary for many everyday actions, like, for example, to pick up a child from a daycare, boarding an aircraft, performing financial transactions, and mostly accessing facilities. Anyway, it doesn't matter the rationale. The belief is that by implementing biometrics, okay, we will have a high degree of certainty regarding the individual's identity, which that I will say is kind of a myth. We will touch that a little bit. This is perceived, it is expected that these benefits, it will save money, save lives. However, still the initial investment is pretty high. So we're talking about savings in the long run. Okay, broad division, physiological, probably the most known ones. When we basically measure some kind of biological part of our body, fingerprint, hand geometry, the iris, or retina, and behavioral. Basically, the big difference is that typically the physiological biometrics can be catched quickly. The file in the computer is smaller, and the behavioral biometrics, it needs a bigger file in the computer, and it takes many samples to figure out. So the physiological biometrics are rich enough to just to put my fingerprint in one shot, or just the camera, and say, okay, let it go. Behavioral, I need to talk for a little bit. I need to move for a little bit in order to catch the information. Okay, so many samples typically are needed, or at least one long sample. This kind of an examples of what are physiological and what is behavioral. For example, the signature is behavioral. Gait, how I walk, keystroke, lip motion, all of those are currently useful biometrics. The signature, for example, not necessarily is to compare one signature against another signature. It's just the act of signing. So it encompasses the motion. The motion has to be the same. What is the major drivers? I would say, in no particular order, basically this was and is the major driver, fear. The major driver was fear. The major driver is just the security. Biometric has been a scientific field that has been since the 50s, in the 40s, beyond, even before that. What happened is that nobody was giving grants to professors that were doing biometrics, so it was going very slow, very slow. Well, it comes out September 11, and now suddenly, boom. Okay, everyone is getting millions and millions of grants to improve, and companies smell big business, and then starting September 11, it was an explosion of biometrics. However, I think due to the fact that we have powerful microprocessors, databases, the computers are everywhere, the whole thing was kind of synchronized with the event of September 11 and has allowed, we have huge bandwidth now. We can do biometrics from our PDA or handheld device. And so everything converged to be a driver for biometrics. What is the perceived benefit? And I say perceived, I emphasize on that, is that we will be more secure, okay? Because passwords and pins are easily guessed or compromised, or if I have a token or a card, it can be stolen. But the biometric data cannot be guessed or stolen, and in the same fashion as passwords, it can be stolen, but not at the same way. Some biometric system can be broken under certain conditions, but and technology created a way to fool the technology. Okay, almost every biometric we have right now can be fooled, sometimes easily, sometimes more difficult. But anyway, we have the society general myth is that by implementing biometrics any place, we will be more secure. Okay, so and this has brought profound consequences, and we will discuss that a little bit later. You cannot forget your biometric. I mean, if it's your face, it's with you, but that has a huge also dark implication, and we will discuss that a little bit later. People feel that it's fun because I don't have to remember a password. I don't have to have a token with me. I just put my face and get into it, and look, we are better now. Well, also biometric has and this is, I believe, is a very nice characteristics, because not all biometrics are equal. So, for example, if you go to a level of the retina of the eye, that's absolutely discriminating. So sometimes you put, let's say, to enter, you can divide privileges. To go to this area, you just need the fingerprints, but to go beyond that, you need, for example, the iris, and to go beyond that, you may need the retina and passwords and so forth. So, yes, there are better biometrics than others in terms of security, or at least discriminating properties to identify humans. The perceived benefit is that is fraud veterans. So right now, the very presence of biometrics in a facility is kind of a, if it's a criminal, kind of say, well, maybe we have to go out, or we don't have to try it. And it's just because it's new. Once the criminals are, in 10, 20, 50, it will be so common that probably will not be a deterrence anymore when many devices to beat the biometrics will be created, for sure. So I will say the field of biometrics we do two things. The first is verification. In verification, I go to a place and I say, I'm Rigo Chinchilla, I need access or I need certain services. So what the biometric system will do is it will take my sample and compare again a sample who is a database, in a database. So it will be in comparison 1-to-1, all right? Typical application accessing a facility. That's what we call verification. Identification, by the other hand, is it's a little bit different because in identification, you don't need to provide your name. You say, guess who I am, okay? Who are you, as the CSI TV song says, you know? It's more like for criminal purposes or when you are trying to figure out who that person is. So you put your fingerprint or you put the face, and then the sample is compared against all the database. It takes time, okay? It could take days sometimes. It depends on how big is the database and how lucky we are in comparing the sample. So these are the broad two things that we do with biometrics. In BioID, it can be a positive identification, meaning the individual is a member of the database in a positive, it's called in a positive way. I mean, because negative way is called screening, which is a list of criminals. Just to verify that I'm not in a blacklist to board a plane, for example. So when we are typically the biometric, we know more is the positive identification, and it has what is called a false accept. Is when an intruder enters the system, is allowed by the system, even though the intruder does not have rights. So that's what we call a false match or false match rate, which implies how many individuals in many were falsely accepted by the system. And then we have what is called the false reject. So legitimate users are denied from service. We will call that a false non-match rate. Okay, so let's see how this looks like. Let me see if I can do this. Yes, it has a pointer here, or is here? Is this one? All right. Okay, so one kind of misconception in the general public. I've been in this field for about 10 years right now, at this point, and when I ask people, the general misconception is that if someone takes your biometrics, in reality, what the computer does is compare a picture against a picture, and that's not true. At the end, you know, when we take a biometric, the computer really only extracts certain points. It doesn't extract all the points. That's why typically you cannot reconstruct the images from the points you extract. So certain points are extracted, and a template is generated, and at the end, the template is nothing more than zeros and ones in a memory. So it's not different than any other file, any other Word document. At the end, we have just ones and zeros, okay? And again, in the database, again, we will have a bunch of ones and zeros, a combinations of ones and zeros. And in biometric system, in reality, does not compare images. It compares ones and zeros against ones and zeros. Okay? This is some typical misconception. You know, say, well, it's comparing my finger. Well, yeah, but you know, basically the algorithm that goes from here to here is the key. The mathematical algorithm and the program that converts a series of ones and zeros from an image is what is the key for that. I always tell my students, the only two persons you need to start a biometric company is a mathematician, a very good mathematician, and a very good programmer. That's all that you need, because after that, sensors are just common sensors. Databases are the same databases. There are just ones and zeros. So the only two persons you need is a mathematician and a good programmer. Okay? Now, zeros and ones are compared against zeros and ones, and there is a module there, which is just another program, basically, which is a statistics module, which measures the probability that this combination is equal to these ones based on the sample, and that statistical complexity is not easy. It's very complex statistical calculation. Comes with a score. So there is a kind of a statistical score. So, and then this score is compared with a threshold. Okay, if I surpass the score, it means it's me. If I go below the score, it's not me. So it's kind of a cut comparison. The problem, one of the big problems, we'll discuss this a little bit later, is that this threshold is set up by the biometric administrator. So we can have the same biometric system in one airport and the same administrator system in another airport, but in one airport they set the score a little bit tight. In another airport they set the score a little bit loose. So you may be accepted in one airport and rejected in another airport, or you may be accepted in the United States but rejected in Israel. Yes?
By tight and loose, does that mean like maybe you budge your finger just a little bit and it will allow for that, or it won't? Like
Yes,
how
yes,
they
exactly,
say-
exactly. The variation, if I put the threshold pretty loose, you know, even big variations, it will be accepted, but also means that the security will diminish. Okay. But the big thing here is I use the statistics here, and then based on that, the individual is accepted or rejected. Okay, so let's begin to see what's in this. The enrollment process, so build the database, is the more complicated part, is the more key part of it. Quality enrollment is a critical factor. And by quality means that the sample is rich enough to be used as a biometric. Okay, that's what we mean by sample, by quality. Generally speaking, when we enroll in a biometric system or template, which is ones and zeros, we'll go to a database. Okay, and here's the problem. The first big problem is that enrollment is, in order to do enrollment, I have to say, well, birth certificate, passport is what typically you use to enroll, or your driver's license. But here's the big problem. And I tell this to my students in every class. I say, do you think that in a very small town, or maybe in a large city, I'm not saying small towns are more criminals than large cities, but do you think that with $15,000 I can get a false birth certificate? Everyone say yes, you know. So if I can get a birth certificate with that money, I can get into the database of the biometric system. So you see, the biometric system is as secure as the process of getting a document. So you have a big biometric system, but if you have a weak system for getting documents, it doesn't matter. It's not more security. So, you know, that's why I said it may perceive as security. And if you remember, in September 11, each of the ones to board the plane, each one has 11 or 10 valid driver licenses. Meaning, even if we had security, they could have used the driver's license to get into the biometric system, and still they will have put, their fingerprints and say, yes, you are what you claim you are, what you claim to be. So again, the template is just ones and zeros. Okay, it's not different than any other file. If any person, even computer programmer, just see a bunch of ones and zeros in a Word document in ones and zeros, it will not make any difference. So most templates, especially the physiological biometrics, occupy less than 1 kilobyte. They're very small. And here's the problem. Most algorithms, the mathematical algorithm to pass from the image to ones and zeros is proprietary. So they cannot release that because it's kind of the secret recipe, okay, of the company. So basically, what my fingerprint looks in ones and zero combination for one vendor, it looks absolutely different mixing of ones and zeros for other vendor. And that has been a big problem so far because we don't have interoperability yet. You begin with Hitachi, you know, fingerprinting equipment, you have to stick with that, typically, because you cannot send the ones and zeros to the other database because the algorithm, and then if you say, well, give me your algorithm, no one will do it because it's proprietary. Well, I will compare more than for the ones we are a little bit older. You remember the time probably 30 years ago, 25 years ago, in which if you get the IBM computers, you know, you have to stick with IBM computers and you cannot change of the computer. It's kind of the same thing, okay? And the government is just going crazy trying to fix this problem, the compatibility problem. The other thing about the template, and let's come back just pretty quickly here, is that it will be, I can tell you almost 100% secure that if one day you enroll and you have a combinations of ones and zeros, if you enroll by the next day, it will be a different combinations of ones and zeros. Why? Because you cannot control the pressure on top of the, you cannot control the humidity sometimes, okay? You cannot, there are several factors that you cannot control. And typically what will happen is, even if when you give your sample the first time, the second time it will be a different match. That's why this has to be statistical. That's the reason. It cannot be a crisp match like a password. It has to be statistic because it has to be complex statistics here which is say, well, it's likely, even though the sample has a different amount of ones and zeros, no amount, but different combinations of ones and zeros, it's likely that this person is the same. And sometimes it cannot be done. Okay, so two templates will never be exactly the same, even if the same person goes 1 hour to another hour. It will still would be 1, 1, or 0 that will not match. So, again, once we match, we get to a score. And the scoring part is also a problem because every vendor has a different scale. I have you're invited anytime you want to come to my lab. I have a face recognition system. And they have a very, for some reason, it's one of the very prestigious vendor of face recognition system. But it's kind of the scores of, the matching scores, statistical matching scores go from 0 to 173. And I say, what is this? I mean, why 173? So every vendor has a different scale scores, which is a nightmare for the government. And this has been a problem. Most strengths and weaknesses has to be of the biometric itself, has to be with the scoring system, although the biggest problem, the biggest hole is in the enrollment. How do you, the technician who is enrolling you, you give a birth certificate that says that you are John Doe, and the technician will say, okay, you are John Doe, and we'll, put you in the database. All right. The kind of decisions we can match, say, well, we can say the degree of matching is okay, we cannot match, and also biometric system has the inconclusive. We cannot conclude who this person is. And then if there is an inconclusive, then it goes to plan B, which typically goes to the ground truth about, you have to show some kind of documents or so forth. So basically, the any biometric system has competing issues. It's a trade-off. People has to accept that. For example, you will not put face recognition in the Middle East. It would be crazy, when women cover their faces. That's a very good example of acceptability of the biometrics. Sometimes one of the problems with retina biometrics, for example, one of the big problems, it's a very good biometric, but it's not implemented because you feel that heat that when you do the eye exam, if you have glasses, when you feel some heat, and then people don't like that, invasiveness, okay? Security costs, there are biometric systems who cost $100. There are biometrics, for the same biometric system for fingerprints with a better resolution and effectiveness, it may cost $10,000, and so forth. Okay, so the fundamental difference between biometrics and passwords or tokens is the degree of a match. In password, it has to be a crisp match, okay? It has to be either it is or it is not. In biometrics is just likelihood, statistical scores. And here is more or less what the game is, and this will be kind of probably the most technical that we will talk today, and then we will pass to the next phase of the presentation. Typically what happens is, this is any biometrics, these are the scores, the distribution, the statistical distributions of the scores. So any biometrics typically has either slightly skewed distribution or normal distribution when in terms of scores. And let's say this is the scores of the people who belong to the database. Still, there is a lot of population. This is the scores, very low scores, very high scores. The threshold is here. And then there is a lot of people who does not belong to the database who score very low, but there are certain little portion of that score above the threshold. This is the people who will be falsely matched. Okay, this area above the threshold represent the probability that people who does not belong to the database will be accepted. And this area here below to the threshold represents the probability that the people who belong to the database will not be accepted, will be rejected. So here's the deal. You see, in this, we said at the beginning that this threshold is set by the administrator. So if I put the threshold, what happens if I move the threshold really tight? Means I don't want to accept people who doesn't belong to database. What will happen? What will happen?
Lose more people
A lot of a lot of people who belongs, it will be rejected. Yeah. And if I move the threshold too low, it will be the inverse. Okay, the contrary. A lot of people who does not belong to the database will be accepted. So putting the threshold is a key part of a biometric system. And what happens when I begin to move the threshold from here to here to here to here and begin to record the areas or the probability, we come with what is called the ROC curve, which represents the way the biometric system works. Basically, if you put the threshold, these are the threshold points. If you put FMR or false match rate very very tight, I need a lot of security. But then what happens is the convenience, a lot of people that belongs to the database will be rejected. And I say, well, I want a lot of convenience. I don't want my clients shouting that they are not accepted. Then you're opening the security of the biometric system. And we cannot avoid that. The day someone creates a biometric system has a curve like this, there will be millionaires. But that's kind of physically impossible right now. So this is kind of the basics of the theory of biometrics. So let's go with the problems, the societal problems. Enrollment process. Again, we already talked about this. This is a huge problem. If I cannot guarantee the emission of documents to imposters, then our biometric system will do little or nothing to increase security. So it's kind of, I don't know what's the example. You can have a big, a big wall that is protecting it. But, if you cannot guarantee who has the permission to enter, which can get the documents easily faked in someplace else, that big wall, it will do nothing, really. It will do nothing. The other problems we have, there is not yet a worldwide acceptance of what quality means in the sample. Some people accept very, very bad samples. Some facilities don't, and that create problems of interoperability. Lack of mature standards, we're still working on that. Just to give you an idea, about 8 years ago, I went to Washington, D.C. to a big biometric gathering, and there were these generals and all these people from the Department of Defense and all the people involved in this. And there were no standards at that point, and they were like saying, hey, who wants to be in the standard committee? just come here, let's start this because we are desperate. So still we are working on the standards. We don't have it. Although this is, I will say in the last 3 or 4 years, has been a lot of progress on this. Some of another technical problems we are building massive facilities with biometrics, but we still don't have the technicians prepared for that. Typically, is the person who knows about computers, the person who in the office knows more about computers, you're in charge. And that's very weak point, because this requires trained people. And that's what we do here in the School of Technology. Okay, we really train them to really administrate a biometric facility. That's what I told my students. After you tell my course, just feel free to go and ask for a job as a biometric administrator, because you will learn to do this in the right way. See, the technicians with minimal, they probably give, 10-hour course or something. They have to collect samples, judge quality, use complex sensors, authenticate documents. Yes, you are John, and enroll people, maintain the biometric facility. That's not an easy. You see, we're telling that we are trying to improve our security with technicians that barely know the system. Okay, because this has been so explosion that the training has not been in pace with the explosion of the facilities. Okay. All right. Say, well, I cannot forget my face, and it's nice. But by the other hand, I told you that this is not anything different than ones and zeros file in a database. What happened when someone hacked that machine and extracts all those ones and zeros? Can you change your biometric? When someone stole the password, the company sends you an email saying, hey, you have to change your password because we have a breach in security. You change the password, that's it. Okay? Yeah, there will be losses. But how about if someone just hacks and takes all the biometrics? And that will happen. I tell you, it hasn't happened yet, but that will happen. Still people is hacking the Department of State's computers. So they can easily now stole the biometrics. And believe it or not, paradoxically, it's a paradox. The fact that we still don't have interoperability is still a security feature because of this. Because if someone stole the ones and zeros, it's possible they cannot use the same combinations of ones and zeros in another place. But once we have the whole interoperability in place, if they stole these files, they can use it all over the place. Okay, so that's scary. So we are not as secure as we think if the hackers can obtain those binary files as they obtain any other binary file. And once you lose your biometric, how you will substitute? Tell me. There is no way. If someone has my face biometric and it's interoperability all over the place, how I will say, well, now what we do? There's nothing to do. Unless you change your face or something, okay? Let's discuss some social consequences of this. What happens when the biometric is used for surveillance purposes? Did you give them permission? Did you consent that they, put your face or, to use your face against a negative, to do screening or negative in ID? And this is something that Wafik and I, we teach a course called Technology and Society or some kind, and if this is it's true. If there is any law in the history of technology, is that technologies are rarely used in ways that their inventors intended. Okay, for example, if you go to the rec center, okay, I'm a gym rat. I go to the rec center. You're doing the elliptical, and there's this camera almost in front of your face. Okay, yes, it's for security purposes, and we hope to do so. But I went to the place with Dr. Izadi and the people that is managing this project, and all those images come to a series of servers, and it's just a matter of put a face recognition software there to identify us. Now, there is the temptation to do that without our permission, probably. They will give us will ask us for that? Probably not. And we will go to that in a few moments. Are the minorities disadvantages in biometric applications? Well, they figured out something in 2002 that, for example, males were easy to identify than females, and Asians are easy to recognize and identify than whites, and African Americans are easy to recognize than white. And I didn't believe this, and with the chief police of Charleston, Lieutenant Baker, which was my student, he did his thesis with me, and we said, let's try to, Brian Baker. So with Brian, we spent 1 year just researching this. Let's try to prove this. And we went to several experiments and several things, and we published a paper about it. And we corroborate this, at least, or by the biometric system we have in our lab. If you are, what we did is Brian get permission to work with 3 very dark complexion officers and 3 very white complexion officers, and we went to several tests for a year until we proved that it's true that black complexion people is easier to identify than white complexion people. So at this point, nobody knows this widely. I guess in the future, some kind of suit will come because of this. Population with disabilities are discriminated. People just with one hand, no iris, no retina, are subject to more scrutiny or more problems in an airport. If you don't have the biometric, you get troubles. That shouldn't be. How about religious belief? You don't want your face to be captured. You don't want to, are not respected. Either you do it or you don't fly, for example. We will come to that in some point. How about people who doesn't have the biometrics have a lot of troubles, and we are, my wife is a living example. She even the most powerful fingerprint machines of the government of the United States cannot capture her fingerprints, believe it or not. she will be perfect to commit a crime because no fingerprints. She doesn't have, I mean, with the technology we have at this point, no machine can capture her fingerprints. And that created us a lot of problems. More money spent, several trips. I mean, it's indirectly discriminating us because we don't have the biometric characteristic, and we have to pay all that money. We have to spend all that time because she doesn't have the characteristic, the biometric characteristic the government wants. And that's a problem. Legal consequences. Here I have to read the Constitution and the amendments when I wrote this paper, and I went through the several concepts, but basically is that what we're trying to say is that in our Constitution, there is a limit in how the government can mess it up with us in terms of our privacy, okay? And also, we have to balance between the society, the rights of the society and the rights of the government to give us security. So it is always a balance. And what happened is that the biometric technologies has put more pressure in this balance. Okay, I'm pretty sure, generally speaking, when I talk with people from police, especially when I was doing the thesis with Lieutenant Baker, you know, the police always have to say, well, they always say that they are doing this because of security, and we believe them. Okay, it's not that we don't believe them, but once our database is there, it has a potential for abuse. So if we don't have laws, pretty clear laws, how they will use that, and the Snowden case, I rest my case, the Snowden case, you know, if we don't have laws that protect us, then our biometrics can be misused. Fourth Amendment protect us against unreasonable searches and seizures. 5th and 14th ensure the due process. Basically says the due process, only the basic thing it says is we had the right to fight the government, you know, because we believe that what the government is doing is not right. So we have the due process. We can sue the government. We can take them to court, say you're not doing the right thing with me or with the people in general, and that's a right we have in our Constitution. But here's the thing. There are two approaches to those rights. The first is the intrinsic approach. The intrinsic approach was the historical principle used by many, many years ago, is the government asks the citizens first. Okay, that's the intrinsic approach. The government of the United States want to implement face recognition, they ask the citizen. The citizens reunite, the citizens come back with an answer. The citizen may reject that, and the government will say no. Okay, we will follow the citizen advice. That used to be the typical way to do it. Okay, so the public is informed about the consequences of the law by experts, and then the public decides if they want it or not. Contrary to that is the instrumental approach. That does not focus on the right of the people to decide if they want something or not. The instrumental approach says, you know what, here's the procedure. The government creates a procedure. As far as we follow the procedure, you don't have anything to complain because I follow the procedure. And the procedure has been approved by the judge without any consultation. But it's approved by the judge, it's approved by the Supreme Court, whatever it is. But here is the procedure, and as far as I follow the procedure, you have nothing to say. So that's the intrinsic instrumental approach. So in the case of biometric, or I will say lately, the last 40 years, is the instrumental approach who has been used by the governments. You know, this is the procedure, it's approved by the judge, you like it or not, swallow it. Okay, if I am an officer of the life, you follow the procedure, you have nothing to say. So, in the name of security, the implementation of biometric technology has followed the instrumental approach. Sometimes, in the name of the security also, we have been passive subjects. Don't say anything. It's for your security. Just don't even think about it. It's for your security. You know, You have to, it's imposed, you have to give me your fingerprint, you have to give me your retina, it's for your security, don't say anything, it's approved. So the public at the same time has not been properly informed of all these problems. Biases in the algorithms, for your complexion, all the problems that we have mentioned before. So, once lawyers and general public begin to understand this, believe me, it will be a lot of suits. Now, do I have the right to privacy to, if I go to the, I tend to believe that if I go to the rec center, I don't want them to capture my face. I think I have that right, but the police or the rec center or the EAU doesn't believe that. You know, no, we can capture your face. It's not, but still we will see a wave of litigations in the future about this, you know, and I don't know what will be the end, but typically we have loss because, for example, the Supreme Court ruled that your face is not private. So at that point, they say, okay, so we can capture your face, you know, and you don't have the right to say nothing. So surveillance is a perfect example between the balance between public security and the right to individual to privacy. So sometimes we cannot do nothing because in the name of security we have to accept it, even though it may be challenged and it may be in the evaluation of the Fourth Amendment. So we will see more of this. The more we implement biometric systems in society, there will be more challenges to the Supreme Court, to the judicial system. So it's a reasonable search. Yes, reasonable search is part of the Fourth Amendment. Okay, but is the reasonable search to capture my face without my consent and compare it to a biometric? Is that reasonable or not? And this is I will finish with this. One thing that has aggravated this legal thing is that we have kind of two generations. You know, every time I go to Facebook and I see all those squares in the faces, I get really scared. You know, but for new generation, they seem like as fun, as okay. So, because what happened is once Facebook has my face, they are building a database with that recognize me, and if you read the fine print of Facebook, they say they belong to them. So my face belongs to them. If I want to use Facebook, my face in that database belongs to them. So I have lose my right to privacy just because I want to use Facebook. What are physiological and what is behavioral? For example, the signature is behavioral. Gait, how I walk, keystroke, lip motion, all those are currently useful biometrics. The signature, for example, not necessarily is to compare one signature against another signature. It's just the act of signing. So it encompasses the motion. The motion has to be the same. What is the major drivers? I would say, in no particular order, basically this is the major driver, fear. The major driver was fear. The major driver is just the security. Biometric has been a scientific field that has been since the 50s, in the 40s, beyond, even before that. What happened is that nobody was giving grants to professors that were doing biometrics, so it was going very slow, very slow. Well, it comes out September 11. So let's go to Mather. So this presentation will pretty much be divided in two big segments. The first segment, we will talk about biometrics in general, the kind of basic theory and basic technology behind it, and then in the second part of the presentation, we will go with the societal and legal consequences this can bring to us, and some of them we're already living it. All right, so just biometrics is just a study of any measurable biological characteristics. Could be anything as far as every human possesses, as far as what we measure is discriminatory, meaning what we measure can uniquely identify every human being. Now, when we put the security on it, we say, well, we are talking about something that we can measure almost instantaneously, okay, and typically by a computer to check the identity of an individual. Why biometrics? Well, it's perceived that is necessary. I'm not that convinced of that, but it's perceived that is necessary for many everyday actions, like, for example, to pick up a child from a daycare, boarding an aircraft, performing financial transactions, and mostly accessing facilities. Anyway, it doesn't matter the rationale. The belief is that by implementing biometrics, okay, we will have a high degree of certainty regarding the individual's identity, which that I will say is kind of a myth. We will touch that a little bit. This is perceived, it is expected that these benefits, it will save money, save lives. However, still the initial investment is pretty high. So we're talking about savings in the long run. Okay, broad division, physiological, probably the most known ones. When we basically measure some kind of biological part of our body, fingerprint, hand geometry, the iris, or retina, and behavioral. Basically, the big difference is that typically the physiological biometrics can be catched quickly. The file in the computer is smaller, and the behavioral biometrics, it needs a bigger file in the computer, and it takes many samples to figure out. So the physiological biometrics are rich enough to just to put my fingerprint in one shot, or just the camera, and say, okay, let it go. Behavioral, I need to talk for a little bit. I need to move for a little bit in order to catch the information. Okay, so many samples typically are needed, or at least one long sample. This kind of an examples.
Welcome to the first EIU Technology and Science Symposium, Revolutions in Science and Technology Paradigms. We have all seen how science and technology change our lives, and in the presentations in this symposium, as you'll see, each presenter will give us a side of the panorama. So this will give us enrichment to our thoughts and ideas. Today is my pleasure to introduce my friend and my colleague at the School of Technology, Dr. Rigoberto Chinchilla, and he explained to us when he came new what the meaning of chinchilla. Maybe he will do that today also, and he is fondly known as Rigo.
Right. Well, good morning.